Stampers, Kim from stampingandperfection.com. Welcome to my technique video for this week. And this is an inlaid die cutting technique. This is a great beyond the basics technique. I've got a bunch of different things I want to show you, different variations of this technique. I've made videos on all of these, but it's especially pretty. The part that's inlaid here is that circle with the rainbow stripe. You can see that it's flat with the card base, which is what makes it inlaid. And that Hello script die has a special technique I'm going to share with you also, as does the U script here. I've used a secondary sentiment on this one, but I really love that. Like if you run your hand across that, that rainbow circle stripe die feels flat with the card. And you can see I've finished all of these cards off with a few sequins or clear enamel drops, and I've just kept them very simple. I wanted to focus on the technique in this video, and because it's come out so long, I'm actually speeding up what you're seeing, and I'm narrating it over it. So I love this particular technique. I think it takes your cards from pretty to a wow card. Now this card I didn't spend a lot of time making a pretty card. I just wanted to show you the technique. So I did a quick and easy stamping, but this is where another inlay technique where you can do this with alphabet dies or any word die, and you essentially do your stamping, then you die cut the word die out, and then give it some dimension with either foam or several layers of the card stock. Now this particular card is how I might use the circle stripe die if I wasn't doing the inlaid die cutting. And this is a very pretty card. I love this particular die. This is again Catherine Pooler's circle stripe die. I've stamped below it. I die cut that out, popped it up on some foam. It's very pretty. It's so much prettier inlaid. The same with this particular card, because I've got a couple little things I like to do on these to really make that sentiment pop, and I'm going to share those tips with you. Then this little twist is using pattern paper. That's pattern paper. Like we have a ton of pattern paper as crafters sitting around. Here's how I might use these particular dies if I didn't do any inlaying techniques. And I love this monochromatic look. It's very elegant, but with that pattern paper it just takes it to the next level. Like that flower just is inlaid right in the card base. Okay, so I'm starting with the first card I'm starting with here is using the Catherine Pooler striped circle die, and I'm using her Hello script, and the particular stamp set I used here is called So Happy. It's got a stamp and a coordinating die set. Now for this particular card, I just die cut that out, and I did the tone on tone, stamped on the card base, put that die cut on top of it using those Derice foam strips, and then I stamped and die cut another floral image that I layered. And this card has lots of dimension. It's got lots of pretty dimension. It's got lots of color. It's very clean and simple, really. And I really like the way that card turned out. But I think with the inlaid die cutting technique, you can take your card to a whole new level. That's the whole thing. So I started with a white card base, or two white card bases. And actually this is just a card panel. It's cut 4 1/4 by 5 1/2, and I die cut that circle out of it twice. I did it once on each one of those, so I have 2 sets. I have a piece of craft foam, cut it 4 1/4 by 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. I'm putting a piece of double-sided adhesive on top of it. This is the easiest way I find, so that's double-sided adhesive on top of craft foam. And that's from Elizabeth Crafts, by the way. I'm just going to put that die cut piece right on top of that, and I'm going to do that to both of those pieces. Okay, so I'm going to end up, this is a great twofer technique. You end up with 2 different cards for the effort of 1. Now I've taken a piece of scrap paper that I have around. You have a ton of this too, and I just laid that die down on the paper, and I marked where the first little like the middle of the solid part of the die, so I could just create some stripes. And I want the stripes to show through where the openings are. I'm keeping this super simple. So here I'm just using my Altenew alcohol markers, my artist markers, and I'm just creating a rainbow, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and violet. And then there was enough to do a small red on the bottom again. I just picked the brightest colors of each different color, and I'm just creating these stripes. I'm not doing any fancy coloring. I'm not doing anything fancy at all. I'm just coloring the stripes on. And then I'm going to go ahead and die cut this piece. So I'm not even blending them well, like I don't care. I just want it to be colorful. So I'm going to go ahead and take some purple tape, and I'm being careful with this purple tape. I got a particularly sticky roll of purple tape here, and I'm going to die cut this out just like I would ordinarily die cut something. And this is the new Sizzix Foldaway Big Shot. I actually quite like this. It's very light compared to my old Big Shot, which I had for a good 8 years, and it's really nice it takes up much less space since this craft room is very small. Now I'm going to keep all of those pieces all together sort of in order, and I've pulled out one of those card bases that I had the circle cut out. I have the craft foam and the sticky tape there, and I just put that in the die cut circle. Now I'm taking the white pieces from the white circle stripe die that I cut out, and I'm placing those into the openings on that colorful die cut, and that will fill it in. And when I run my hand over it, it's actually going to feel like one smooth piece of paper. It's amazing. And like this, this is a little bit time consuming. This particular die, I picked this to demonstrate because it just is so quick. Like, look how quick that was. Although that was double time, so pretty. Now you can do the same thing with the second one. Again, I have my craft foam and my adhesive sheet. They're cut about 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. The card front that I'm using here, the mat, is 5 1/4 by it's 4 1/4 by 5 3/8. Now I'll take that white striped circle die cut that I've cut out and place it back into the circle of the card front mat there. Now I'm just putting those leftover colorful stripes back into where they belong on that die cut. And you can see I'm using tweezers. I quite like these tweezers for this. Sometimes I don't use tweezers, sometimes I do. It depends on my mood or how small the pieces are. These are from EK Success. I really like these. All of this stuff is available in Catherine Pooler's shops. I'll put the links below. Okay, so I'm just going to finish this up. And I always love running my hand over the top of that card when I'm done because, see, it's just flat. It's like the card front that's laid right into the card. And to finish that off, I'll just add some adhesive and put that right onto a card base. All right, so now I've got 2 pieces of scrap black cardstock, and I'm going to use some tape runner here, or this is Altenew's tape runner adhesive, and I'm adhering 2 of those pieces of black cardstock together, and these are just big enough to hold that U script die. And again, I'm going to go ahead and die cut these. Now I've already done this 3 other times because I have 2 card fronts. I need 2 sets of the U script. I want to have a total of 4 layers. So I found that with my die cut machine, since it's new, it's pretty tight, so I can do 2 layers of cardstock at once. So I created, altogether now, I've created 4 of these double layered U scripts. I want a total of 4 layers on my sentiment. So you can see how easy everything pops out. With a new die cut machine, you don't have to worry about extra shims or anything. It's amazing. So now I'm going to take 2 of those double layered U scripts, and I'm just going to adhere them together. You can use any adhesive you want. I particularly like this Altenew one because it's like little dots of glue, and when I run it on the back of this, it just goes onto the cardstock. It doesn't go, and sorry that I'm doing black on black here. I should have put something white underneath this, but it doesn't go onto my craft mat, so it doesn't make a mess. A lot of times I'll use my liquid glue, and a lot of times I'll also use adhesive, or not adhesive, but tweezers to do this, especially on the very little sentiments. I picked big ones here. I've already layered the other one, so there's 4 layers of cardstock on each one of those. And again, love these particular craft tweezers from EK Success. So now the technique, I want to make this look like an enamel piece. I actually sent one of these to my sister, and she said, "Where did you get that script piece?" And I said, "I made it. It's 4 layers of cardstock, and now I'm heat embossing it, and I'm going to use clear embossing powder, and I'm going to do that twice." It just, I don't know, it just finishes it off, and it gives it gives the die cut a super smooth, super shiny finish, and it really comes out beautifully. So I'm just shaking them off, and I'm not being all that careful because I know I'm going to do it twice. And I'm putting them on my Totally Tiffany paddle there, and I'm using my embossing stand. That's my Totally Tiffany embossing station. So handy. Now here, when you look at them, they look really nice, and this would be perfectly fine because now they're super shiny, but they still have some dimples in them. You know how sometimes you look at a big embossed thing and you can see some little dimples in it, especially with this technique, just doing it once. So I'm going to add my embossing powder again. Now, if you're quick enough, you can just pull it off your little paddle there, and or use your tweezers just to dunk it directly. As soon as you're done heat embossing it, it's usually warm enough to actually just go right back into your embossing powder and then reheat it. But I'm adding a little bit more embossing ink there and a little bit more embossing powder, and I'm going to reheat this again, and I'll try to show you the difference. Try this at home because it gives you these super thick, super sturdy embossed pieces. So after I heat set this and hold this up, you can see that is just super smooth and shiny. It's beautiful. It actually looks like enamel. So it's a good way to fake it, and it's a good way to get a really pretty, this is a wonderful technique to use for your alphabet die cuts in your scrapbooks. It's really pretty. Just if you want a really special title or sentiment and you don't want to spend a bunch of money on one. So now all I do to attach this to the card is I use liquid adhesive. You can use anything. That tape runner would work. I tend to put a clear block on top to hold it down. Here I've added a secondary sentiment, "I cherish." That's from, I'm pretty sure that's from that same Catherine Pooler So Happy stamp set. And you can see I used hello on one. I finished it off with a few die cuts. Here's the So Happy stamp set. This is a fairly new release, or at least it's one I just got, and I actually really like this. So another way to use this technique is to use pattern paper. The card on the right is inlaid die cutting with pattern paper. It's a very busy piece of black and white paper covered in words. Like, I didn't have any idea what I was going to use it for, so I pulled out this lava lamp cover die from Catherine Pooler, and this particular cover die covers the entire front of your card. It's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. I just did the same thing. I cut it out in white and I cut it out in pattern paper, and then I just proceeded to inlay the pieces, in the white pieces, into the black and white card stock. Now this is an example of how I might use the cover die without an inlay technique. I created a quick background just with simple stripes like I did before. But there are much prettier ways to make backgrounds. This is not a pretty way to make a background. And then just put the cover die and sentiment on top of it. For the next technique, I want to show you this inlay technique. This is an especially pretty inlay technique because the part you die cut is given dimension. This works great for all those alphabet stamp sets you have and all those word dies, whether they're script or print or whatever. You can use this with separate alphabet letters. It's very pretty that way because then you can space them out the way you want. This is kind of a tight little script, and I'm making sort of a small little image here. And I'm using Catherine Pooler's Blue Skies Ahead stamp set. I just got these stamp sets, so I was kind of excited about playing with them. And I was endeavoring to create red, orange, and yellow, but the orange doesn't show up very well. So I'm just sort of, stamping and putting a little blue on the base. So just using basically some primary colors, just stamping out a rainbow. I'm going to give it a quick watercolor wash or a quick little smoosh technique watercolor wash on the bottom there to ground the rainbow a little bit. This is not a fancy card by any stretch of the imagination. So because I don't want to focus on the card, I want to focus on the technique. But this is last week's technique. And I just smooshed some suede shoes ink there. I'm giving it a few drops to make it look like it's raining above the rainbow. And then I'm just going to add what looks like a puddle. I've spritzed that ink that I squished onto that cellophane, added a little bit of water, very little water, because this is just regular cardstock, and created a little wash. So now I'm going to do a similar thing. I'm not using the foam at this point. I'm putting the adhesive sheet directly onto the back of my stamped piece this time. And now I'm going to go ahead, I'm just trimming down the edges because I cut it a little bit too big. Those are fantastic scissors. Those are Tim Holtz haberdashery shears. They're like 9 inches long. They're fabulous for cutting down the edges of things. Okay, so I'm going to leave that adhesive backing on there, and now I'm going to die cut my sentiment directly out of the card front that I just stamped. So I'm going over the stamping. I'm trying to be careful with that purple tape because this roll of purple tape is super sticky, and it really does take off the color of my card. It's just amazing. Usually the purple tape is amazing and you don't have to worry about it. Okay, so I take this out. Now, above what I'm doing here, you can see I've already got the hello die cut. I did it 4 times in white cardstock, and then I adhered those all together with my Altenew adhesive or with liquid glue. I use both. So I've got that all ready to go, and I've got a secondary sentiment that says you've been on my mind, and I'm just popping this out. I don't usually have trouble getting these out, but you can see when I do, I'm just using my Tim Holtz craft pick to get the pieces out. Now you want to keep those pieces. I just threw them in my little garbage bin there on my desk. So now I have to go through my garbage bin and get out the pieces. So don't do this. I usually have a little bowl sitting by that I put them in, but I don't know. I just got distracted. It's one of those days. So I'm pulling out my little, that's actually magnetic, which doesn't matter here, but I use it to hold my die so I don't lose them on my desk or accidentally throw them in the garbage. So the craft pick will help me just get these pieces out, and in general I don't have a problem. But again, this is a new Big Shot. So I'm just going to pull this out, and you can see the adhesive on the back of that. So, and when I flip it over, you can see that I've got the stamped image on top. I've got 4 of those, that's 4 layers, and I was going to rock the edges, but there are a lot of edges, and I want to get even inside the loops and stuff. So I'm going to just pull out a red marker from my Altenew alcohol markers, and I'm just going to use the brush end to go over all the edges, including the inside edges, inside the loops, everywhere. So I'll just cover this. This is one of those little tips that will actually really make your sentiment pop. Because sometimes you see these cards on Pinterest and they haven't done this particular step, so while it looks beautiful, it doesn't, like, the stamping blends in with the die cut, so it's hard to tell what the die cut says. So by doing this, or using, instead of using white paper, maybe I could have put 4 layers of red together, or even blue. Like, that would have made it pop out even more if I'd done contrasting color, but I picked a coordinating color with my die there. So I'm just going to finish this up, and then I'm going to adhere that hello piece to the front, or the top of it. So I have that all together, so I'm going to go ahead and pull out my original front piece, and you can see that there's nothing behind that. So I have to actually put something behind that, so I can actually now put that layered sentiment back in. I'm pulling out a piece of white scrap paper, and I want to actually make this red in case I don't get things perfectly lined up. This will sort of camouflage that, and I just need the piece to be big enough for behind the hello sentiment. So I've just swiped my ink pad on, and I've sort of created my own colored cardstock there, and I'm going to go ahead and put that on the back, and I'm just pulling out a card base that I have cut. It's 5.5 by 8.5. I just scored it at 4.25, so I'm just making sure it lines up. And I'm going to go ahead and remove that adhesive backing. Hopefully I'll remove that adhesive backing. I'm probably going to need to get my craft pick out here. So I'll attach the red to the back of it. I'm just being careful that nothing is bent there. And I'll stick that to the card front. And now, basically, I have to plunk that sentiment in there, and I'm just using some liquid adhesive, and I just put a few dots around. I like to especially get the tops and the bottoms, and the little thin pieces need just a drop of glue. You don't need a ton of glue, like I'm just putting little drops there. And I've got a special applicator tip on that glue that is super thin, so it makes it easier to add glue to pieces like that. So I'm using those same tweezers, and I'm just popping this down in and making sure I get it lined up okay, lined back into the spots. But that's why I created the red. Now you could leave it like this because you can see the red through the loops and stuff doesn't look terrible. The thing is, I like it to look like it's seamless with the background image. So I'm going to go ahead and hold that down for a minute or so. I'll get my secondary sentiment ready. And that came from another Catherine Pooler stamp set called Fluttering Friends. So I've added some adhesive to that. I just heat embossed that in white on black. And I'm going to take that off because that's now got all those, the little skinny pieces were kind of hard to stick down. So now I'm just going to put some glue into each one of those little loops and add the piece that goes in there. So I'm just going to use my tweezers and I push them all the way down to the card base because I want those to be set all the way in. The only dimension comes from the script word. I want those to be set down in the card. But like I said, you could leave that red there or whatever color you decided. Like if I had put blue, maybe that would have looked kind of cool. But this makes it look like, how'd you do that, you know? So I'll just finish putting those pieces back in. So I just finished this card off by adding my secondary sentiment. I've popped that up on a little bit of foam tape, and this is all done. I just love the way that's inlaid in there. Like it's such a pretty technique, and you can do it with so many different stamp sets. And remember your alphabet die sets. Those work great for this. Now, I wanted to show you, this is the pattern paper I used for that other card I showed you with the inlaid die cutting. It's called Foldaway. It's from scrapbook.com. I actually got it free one day. It's Vintage Girl, and it's not my particular style of papers, but it was free, so I'll use them for special techniques. So this is the lava lamp die you can see here. And then I just have a whole bunch of these cover dies. These are decadently expensive. They're just ridiculously expensive. So if you purchase these, you want to use them for more than just regular cover die things. I create stencils out of them. I do all kinds of things. Now, the card I want to show you here is using what I call an outline die. I'm not quite sure what they're called, what anybody else calls them, but I've got a couple different like florals from Altenew. I especially like the floral ones. These are independent dies. This does coordinate with the stamp set, but you wouldn't use this die to cut out that stamp set. Now, what I wish I'd done here is snip those dies apart, because with a new die cutting machine, the little wires in between will actually come out. I cut these little flowers out of the pattern paper that I selected, and then out of white paper. And I'm being very careful when I take them off, because I kind of want to keep those pieces where they belong so that I can pull them out and easily put them in place in the floral paper. So I already had the double-sided adhesive on the back of this piece. I'm now putting this on top of a piece of craft foam, which is cut at 4 1/8 by 5 3/8. Then I can just drop the little floral pieces right back in. And these are, by the way, Catherine Pooler's Hello Fabulous craft dies, or these are the Pair of Roses craft die. They sort of coordinate with the Hello Fabulous stamp set. The nice thing about a die this size is that you can use it on all those scraps of pattern paper you've been saving too. So that's nice. And the other thing too is, a lot of times when I create backgrounds, I create a background on a larger sheet of paper, so I have scraps of that. And imagine some of the beautiful alcohol ink or watercolor backgrounds you've created, or even stenciled backgrounds, you know, things you've used special techniques for, and you save that piece that you didn't want to throw away because you could use it another day. It would be perfect for something like this. Okay, so then the next step is then to take the inside pieces of the white rose and then just plunk them down inside. So once you pop that piece inside, it'll all lay flush and it'll be inlaid in the flower inside the card front. And you can continue with that process until you have both of those florals complete. And there you go. So you can see that I use my craft pick to do this one for those really little tiny pieces. And I really like having the adhesive on there. It definitely helps a lot to already have adhesive on, so I don't have to try to squeeze glue into those little tiny places. And I don't have any glue squishing out the sides. So I personally like those adhesive sheets. You can use a Xyron machine, you can use your liquid glue, you can use whatever it is that you like to use for your adhesive. So to finish this, I'm just going to add that panel to my card base and add a sentiment and some embellishments. Just to show you how I finished off these cards, I just wanted to share that this is how I finished this up. I used the same script paper that I used, and this is what the paper looks like to start with. It was a pretty floral paper. And that's what it looks like when you die cut it. It's so pretty. So for the script this time, I cut a couple of black layers and adhered them together, and then I put the script layer on top, but with a little twist. For this one, I just slid that script word over a tiny bit so I would get this black drop shadow on this card. And then you can see I stamped a secondary sentiment directly on the card. So that just finishes it off nicely. It leaves me lots of white space. I can add sequins if I want to, but I love that I've got this inlaid die cutting, and then I've got this raised die cutting, so I've got dimension on this card. I really, really like this. This is a fun technique. And you have all those scraps of paper. Like, I can use this for many more cards, and I can even use it, you know, for a full front of a card, or, you know, part of a front of a card at least. So then I took the leftover white pieces that I had, the outline pieces, and just adhered them to the front of the card, added the hello script, and I've got this pretty tone-on-tone, very elegant card that I can send to someone. So I really like that. I feel like hello cards are my most versatile because I can write a thank you inside, I can write a happy birthday, and then this one you saw how I finished that off. You saw those. These are the ones that I also wanted to talk about. I wanted to share with you. So I shared with you that I used the lava lamp cover die, but this is the paper that I started out with. See how busy that paper is? It's great paper. I'm not sure I would use it for a card front. Maybe it would look great under the cover die, but I loved the way it came out. Absolutely love the way this came out when I cut the cover die out in just white, and then I cut it out of this paper, and then I put it on. This is just a piece of cardstock. I didn't even put this one on foam, and then just laid the white pieces that I would have ordinarily just thrown away in onto the inside, and I just put a black script hello. That's that. I love this card. Later I can add a secondary sentiment when I go to send it, so quick and easy. Now the one thing I did on this one, and I'm not sure how well you'll be able to see it, I was just playing around. I just wanted to like, I don't usually make marker stripe backgrounds. Generally I would blend a background, or I do an alcohol ink background. Even pattern paper looks really pretty under these cover dies, and these cover dies make great stencils, by the way. You can use your cover die as a stencil as well. There's just so many ways to get your money's worth out of these dies, and these are pricey dies. But here, like I did the drop shadow on this card with the black cardstock. On this one I used a black sentiment, and I have one layer of white underneath, and I just shifted it to the left a little bit so you can see very lightly that I've got this drop shadow next to my hello. It just makes that black pop a little bit, and I think the black drop shadow here makes this one pop a little bit. You can even exaggerate that more if you want to by just sliding it over just a little bit more, and you can get even more of a drop shadow. So that's another little trick you can use to take your card techniques beyond the basics. So thanks for watching. You can stop by my blog at stampingimperfection.com to get a printable list, or a list that you can save on your computer in a techniques folder if you want to. I'll have pictures of these, and just a quick summary of the inlaid die cutting technique, a little like step-by-step list. So you'll find links to all the products below. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a like and share with your friends, and make sure you subscribe to my channel and click that bell so next time I put up a video you will know right away. Thanks for watching.